On this episode of the Next Big Thing podcast, we have the privilege of talking to Dr. Harry Kloor of Beyond Imagination. During the episode, we talk about how AI powered humanoid robots could become an integral part of our daily lives, workplaces, and even our households, and how Beyond Imagination is working to make that happen. Dr. Kloor is an incredibly fascinating person, so I hope you listen to the entire interview.
Come join us on our mission to discover the next equity crowdfunding startup that will change the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel down below. It would mean the world to us. Now enjoy the episode. You will not want to miss it.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Next Big Thing podcast, where we interview the founders and CEOs of crowdfunding startups. Today, we welcome on Dr. Harry Kloor, a renowned scientist, visionary, and the founder and CEO of Beyond Imagination, a company that's taking the lead in mass commercializing AI-powered humanoid robotics. Dr. Kloor co-founded Beyond Imagination in 2018 with Ray Kurzweil, but the idea goes way further back than that, and we will get into that at some point. And he pioneering the development of the BEOMNI AI Brain and multimodal artificial intelligence system capable of empowering humanoid robots. That's a mouthful. Through his visionary leadership, Dr. Kloor is ushering in a new era where robots could become an integral part of our daily lives, workplaces, and even our households. Beyond Imagination's goal of producing 10,000 humanoid robots controlled by expert minds in the next 5 years is a testament to his commitment to this futuristic dream. In addition to his work in science, Dr. Kloor is a film producer, director, and writer. You may have heard of some of the shows he's been a part of. He has written for Star Trek Voyager and was the story editor of Gene Roddenberry's Earth, Final Conflict, a series he co-created and developed. Fun fact is that Dr. Kloor was the first to be awarded 2 PhDs simultaneously in 2 distinct academic disciplines, physics and chemistry, both earned at Purdue University. And I thought I saw in there that maybe ABC might have named you Person of the Week back in 1994, but, the listeners out there can look that up for themselves. You can find him on LinkedIn and on Twitter at Harry.Kloor. That's HARRYDOCKLOOR. With that being said, Dr. Kloor, thank you for taking the time to join us today, and welcome on the Next Big Thing.
Hey, it's exciting to be on your podcast. I have a little rocket ship that is exact to your logo.
Fantastic. That's good to know. Good to know. Perfect fit. Tell us about Beyond Imagination.
Beyond Imagination was designed and is designed to bring autonomous humanoid robots to market. We are building an AI synthetic brain, and what we train in it is what we call expert minds. So you all of us have organic brains, and what career we choose is based on what expert mind we create for ourselves. So our goal and our focus is what goes in your head, and then that determines the form of the robot that we've built. So our robots are humanoid from the waist up, and we use wheeled systems on the bottom because nobody makes a pizza with their feet, nobody does a surgery with their toes, and the real important stuff happens from the waist up. The key for our success has been a long-term plan of building these robots going back. Ray and I started noodling this in the year 2000. Our first patent was granted in 2013, filed in 2003. And our company was launched in 2018 because we had to wait for both AI, for robotics, for sensors, and a whole bunch of other things to catch up to us. We use a system called Human in the Loop using a VR AI interface to train the AI. And our system has evolved. So now, because we have some AI built in, we just use a direct headset. You can jump right into the robot and begin doing the activities to train the AI to do a job. And why is that important? Because if you were to just train in a robotic hand to say pick up something, it would take forever. But now I can take a surgical assistant, or I can take a line worker in a manufacturing, or I can take a cook or a prep cook or a cleaner and have them do their job through the robot take that data, and then through reinforcement learning, create what we call an expert mind. So I think the best thing for me to do is start off with a video, because it sounds kind of like one of the Star Trek episodes that I've written, and perhaps showing in this case is a must. So I'm going to play a little video. So the key for us, and one of our approaches, is we love all this large language chat evolution. But what they've built, we think, is a great appetizer. We want to deliver the main course, which is our expert minds that are multimodal for work. So this graphic here basically sums up our synthetic brain handles sight, sound, touch, motion planning, natural language processing, 3D spatial awareness. It also has a sense of self-awareness, not consciousness, but it can tell the difference between itself and object in the room. And what's important is its neural net is capable of basically understanding and responding to complex human interactions, both for the humans around it and the humans that help train it. So this was a early test we did more than 2.5 years ago. It was a challenge, which was, could you build a humanoid robot and have it do a two-handed task without it being set up? And that's exactly what we have here. So we see the robot taking an opener and opening up a Coca-Cola product. Maybe they can sponsor you guys. One of our traits that's different than, I think, everybody else, like Boston Dynamic was the main company that preceded us. Honda and Toyota had dropped out. We're the company that has created this new wave of robots, from Elon Musk to Figure to Sanctuary on down. They all will be hiding in the lab for many, many years. Last year, we did a road show to expose the robot and have it work around and interact with humans around the entire planet. So we started at CES, having it interact, showing people how we used to train it, having it challenged. And then we went all around the US, ended up in New York, where we did a week at the world famous Explorers Club and their gala. And eventually, by October, we landed in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where we were the #1 featured tech at the Future Investment Initiative. And here on screen, you see the robot interacting with some sheiks. And one of the key is, since we build the important thing about your mind and what goes into it, that determined the form of the robot, as I said. And the base here is a wheeled base. It has special features to prevent it from tipping over, in essence, a gyroscope function. It can go from 5'2" to 6'2". The difference between this and a leg system, far more stable, insurable. It's not going to fall over and crush someone. And it will run 10 to 12 times longer than any leg system on the earth, period. We've been approached by a whole range of industries, from manufacturing, construction, hospitality, nuclear power plants, agriculture, of course, healthcare, logistics, you name it. The robot has very articulate fingers, hands, wrists are very human-like, but it also, besides being able to pick up large weights, is fine enough to do this pinch of salt. We've been training it and testing it for a variety of things. This was a test for cellularity by Bob Harari, a publicly traded stem cell company. It can use any human tool, and no one handed the robot these tools. It just went and picked them up. Strong enough to push that drill through as many times as you want. It's working around a hot stove.
Incredible.
This was very early in 2021, November. We had it tested at true pace. This is in Vegas, where we're showing you how we get the data into the robot. We let people challenge to see if the robot with the human operator could do any task. Pretty much it did. This is it in New York. This was doing Singing in the Rain, actually. So we found out at this facility here at True Pace, this is a place where people are 65 to 99 years old. They get health, get rehab, they get social, they get dental. And everybody loved the robot. In fact, the robot was invited to a birthday party for a 99-year-old. We got to come along, but it was the robot that was invited. And why that's key is if you look at other people's robots, they're very Terminator-ish. They're very scary, or they're very cartoony. Our system has been designed so that it can be appealing to kids, old people, everybody. And of course, this is making it rain with the robot.
That's awesome.
So that's just a small sample, and quite literally, you're only limited by your imagination on this. So I will stop that share and pause to see if you guys have any questions.
Well,
otherwise, Kloor, I can just keep going.
I mean, it's an amazing idea, and there's a lot I want to get into. But I think it's best if we start at the origin of the idea. So can you tell us, when did Beyond Imagination start? Because you founded it in 2018, but you said you started thinking about it, started filing for patents way before that. So can you tell us the origin of Beyond Imagination?
So the very original idea for this actually occurred when I was a child. I was born with my legs backwards, about 210 degrees. And all the experts said I would be that way my whole life. My mom refused to accept that and did some research. And through her therapy, I eventually ended up being able to take my braces off and run and play and become actually a martial artist. But while I was disabled, I began to dream about, well, what if I had a robot body and I could become the robot? Then I could run around and play and interact, with all my friends and my brothers. And then eventually I decided, well, the robot could be super strong and fast. That would be even better. And then I could have millions of them all over the universe. So it really started to be born from there. And then the more science fiction I got into, even after I had overcome this disability, I decided this would be a great way to re-enable people using what we call an avatar function, but more importantly, to train AI to become autonomous. And so the dream was born from there. And in 2000, Ray Kurzweil and I met, and he had the same dream about building autonomous robots. And we filed our first patent, as I said, in 2003. And the rest is history.
So you mentioned AI, and I feel like that's a buzzword nowadays where a lot of people just throw the word AI around, don't really know the actual meaning. So can you tell us what AI is and the impact you think AI will have on our life going forward?
Sure. So, and there's a lot of misconception. People think the reinforcement learning is the AI. It's not, or the neural net is the AI. The AI are various models that you can build and algorithms to be able to take sensory input and make decisions from it, similar to you. So for us, there's the synthetic mind, which is the architecture for bringing in sight, sound, touch, motion planning, some cognitive level functions. We also have a variety of non-AI features built into the software. And that's the architecture. And then the AI is the model that we build so that when it hears something or it takes a command or it sees an object, it sees its environment and it knows what its task is, it can then complete that task. And the very big difference between what we're doing and part of our focus is, well, we have an omni brain. And that's the idea of you in the servers, it's learning all the various tasks, but we assemble in terms of an actual skill set and an actual expert mind, a career. So the expert mind of a surgical tech, the person transitioning instruments to the doctor and back, is different than the expert mind for a line worker on a manufacturing floor, which there'd be thousands of different jobs, right? But in the omni brain, they can all exchange and learn from each other. When we put our AI model to the edge, the expert mind to the edge, it's very focused, because what you can't have is an AI hallucinating that is working around people through a robotic body. So we've seen the very embarrassing situation for Google when they were demonstrating to 60 Minutes their fantastic AI, only to have 60 Minutes come back later in the segment and go, those 5 books you recommended were complete hallucinations. Authors don't exist, the books don't exist, and you're going to get that, and that's why there are big limitations to these large language models. We can't have that, and the way you get around that is being very focused. So if you're focused on your task, you can put in the boundaries and put in other systems. And our system is based on your biology of lobes in your head. So you don't have just one brain doing one thing. You have lobes in your brain taking care of different things. We have a similar approach.
Before we go any further, I want to make sure you have the opportunity to share your deck as well, if you want to go through that.
All right. So just to go through a little bit of the deck to give people a clearer idea of what it is that we're building and why we're building it. I want to start off with a big question I always get, which is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And am I going to destroy everybody's job? And the answer is no. The problem we're trying to solve is that there is a developing world labor shortage, and it's going to be bigger every year. So right now, there's 30 million or so jobs throughout the Western world that don't have workers. There'll be 85 million by 2030. Our approach is to go out and capture the skills, to train the AI brain, and then be able to deploy it in our robots and down the road through APIs and other folks' robots and fill these jobs. Now, will there be some jobs that people lose? Obviously, there will, but that's not the goal of the system. And I'll note to the audience that there's about 3.2 million people who die from occupational hazards every year. And that doesn't mean they die on the job. It means that because of what they're exposed to, they end up dying. So it would be probably good to get rid of these dirty, dangerous jobs and have humanoids do them. One of the areas we're focusing on as a first use case is in the hospitals and clinics. There are about 65 million healthcare workers worldwide. By 2030, they expect there to be a gap of about 18 million worldwide. And our goal here is just to do 10,000 by 2028, because I'd rather over deliver and under promise. So if we hit 100,000 or a million by then, fabulous. But even if we hit 10,000, that will be a home run for us. And how big is the problem? Well, last year, 80% of the hospitals lost money because the free market caught up to the hospital system. What does that mean? With too few workers, those workers suddenly realize that they can demand higher pay. So now what you have is a double whammy to the hospitals. They earn most of their money doing these operations and clinical, both day operations and overnight stays. And they're doing fewer of them because they have less workers, and each one they're doing is costing them more. That's led to a big loss to the hospitals. But it's also a loss to people, because there are people who need to get procedures who can't. A very quick look at where we're at. We have a lot of experience in our team in terms of AI and robotics. Currently, we have 8 patents, 42 more to file. And to date, we've raised actually over $5.6 million. 97% of that is from accredited investors. And I've discussed a bit about the AI brain, but I'll give you guys a deck in case you guys want to take a look at it. What is the big value differentiation between us and everybody else? For us, it's because we think what's important is what goes into your brain and what goes into it. And all of our competitors who've come out since we launched are focused on the human form, and in particular legs. If you were to ask them why legs are important to do a job, they wouldn't be able to tell you. We did our first pilot case at True Pace, which was a community care. I showed some of that in a video. What was really interesting here is our main goal is autonomous humanoid robots, but we can use the same feature we use to train the robots to remobilize people. So imagine all the people who are have a disability. They're crippled from the waist down. Maybe they're completely crippled and they can only move their head. You could jump into these robots and be able to live an active life. Or maybe you're 90 years old and you want to go play basketball against your grandson. In these systems, you can. One of the key things the doctors loved about this system was the ability not only to train it to be a nurse or surgical assistant, but if they wanted to see their patients, that if this robot was in their home or in a facility, they could jump in and have absolute continuity of care. So both functions are important. Our first lines that we're aiming to release is what we call KoboCom, KoboClean, KoboRep, and KoboTech. KoboCom is bringing a remote surgeon or expert into the surgical room, which now is done simply with screens. KoboClean is an autonomous robot that will clean the instruments and make sure that there is no biomaterials on the instruments. Infections from unsterilized equipment do happen, and it's very costly both to the patient and to the hospital. KoboRep is basically the ability to bring in a surgical rep into the room and not have to have them there physically. And the first one we're doing for full on is a KoboTech, which is that person who transitions instruments back and forth to the doctor. Now, why that is interesting is because it's a very high level problem to solve with very complex haptics. So it's challenging us on our AI haptics that we want to develop. But once we lock this down, being able to then make a autonomous cooking robot or autonomous cleaning robot or autonomous laundry robot becomes very simple. And in terms of our business model, in today's world, we don't have a huge budget. Most corporations don't have huge hardware budgets. What they have is huge labor and overhead budgets. And you can't, if you're running a corporation, just go over to the guys who have the labor budget and say, hey, can I get $10 million from you guys so I can buy some robots? That's not going to happen. So what we've done is create the best for the customers and, quite frankly, for us and our investors, which is robots as a service and AI as a service. So if you need a worker, our plan is if it's between 50 and 100K of cost, then we will lease you that robot at that cost for one employee. These will run between 7 and 10 years. The cost that we're seeing on the BOM is less than $50,000 for the robot. So in essence, after the first year, you'll have paid for the cost of the hardware. And the customer gets a huge labor savings, because what you have to keep in mind is a humanoid robot of this sort can work 24 hours and 7 days a week. And so a lot of hospitals have 3 shifts. Even those who have 2 shifts save 74%. And so you get a giant labor savings, but you also get infinite scalability or descalability if you don't need them. You get the ability to have, if one of them makes a mistake, all of them the next day know not to make that mistake. You don't get any drama, you get no strikes, you don't get any employment taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So the benefits to folks are immense, and it will go across all areas. Our go-to-market is quite detailed, but here's a simplification, which is we're going to surgical first, and then elder care, and AI brain-driven dementia care, and then manufacturing process applications, retail, etc. Our goal is to IPO in 4 or 5 years. Roadmap is too much for me to discuss right here, and we're currently actually out to raise $40 million. So I'm going to end it there. And in fact, today is the last day of our WeFunder campaign. And we may or may not open another one down the road. We opened our campaign not essentially to raise money, but to allow the everyday investor to get in. I would have loved to invest in Apple before it became public. Peter Diamandis and myself and Ray were staunch advocates for crowdfunding to become possible. So for a decade before it was possible, we were speaking on it. And that's one of the reasons we opened the campaign.
Fantastic. And I'm glad you got to go through that deck, because it answered a lot of my boring investor questions about go-to-market strategy and stuff like that. So now I can just nerd out. So I kind of want to take this in the direction of quality of life and impact on people. You talked a lot about, and on your website it says, by taking on tasks often considered undesirable or unsafe, our robots will amplify the productivity in the workforce while ensuring a globally secure and efficient supply chain. Can you maybe explain to people why they should care about that?
Well, I guess the question is do people care about inflation eating up all of their money, or do people care about the fact that they can't get in to see a doctor to get treatments, or do people care about their friends and neighbors who may become injured or die on the job or because of the job? And so that's why they should care. They should care because it's quality of life. It's an access issue. Um, I care not just about the people here in the U.S., but also around the world. So in a future where I have uh, nurses and doctors and other healthcare workers that can be autonomous AI robots, now 2 billion people who don't have access to a professional healthcare worker could suddenly have access. And that won't happen overnight. It'll happen one expert mind at a time. But certainly there's much about medicine that could be performed by an autonomous humanoid. And we plan on building some of that. And eventually our path, by the way, for a roadmap is we'll be building the first 5 to 10 expert minds, but we'll be opening up our platform for outside developers. So just like you can develop apps for the iPhone or for the Android, we'll be making our synthetic brain model available so people can make their own expert minds. They'll run on our platform, and we think it's better for us to get a small portion versus the entire pie, because that will go them from 10 to thousands and tens of thousands of humanoids. In addition, we'll always be like Apple in the sense of here's the premium hardware and here's the AI brain. But I also think there's a value in being Microsoft, so that you make APIs so you can run these expert brains on other bodies. They'll just have to make sure they have the right multimodal sort of senses.
So I think when people think AI and robots, they either immediately get scared or they tell you you're crazy, which at this point in our lives now is not true anymore. Especially the crazy part, because it's a real part of our lives. Can you give a realistic or your view, which I imagine is as informed as anybody else's, view of how this will impact the global economy and what robots can do, and why people shouldn't be super scared, and maybe why they should be scared?
So there's actually a couple questions there, because one is AI by itself and all the different ways that it's going to influence the world, from accounting to legal work to entertainment field. Look, I'm part of the WGA and we're on strike along with the actors because of issues dealing not only with AI
Mhm.
but fair pay.
Yep.
Uh, and so that's going to be evolving, and some people will be losing jobs in the same way that most of us don't work in the agricultural fields, but we'll get better paying jobs. And in fact, artists and lawyers and other people who learn how to use these tools, because that's what it is. People have to understand that AI is a tool, and so people, I use it all the time if I want to do a simple task and make sure my grammar is correct. But what you don't want to do, though, is just use the AI, because the AI writing is terrible in the sense that it says the same crap over and over again. It's getting better, but it still hallucinates and it's very verbose. Then there's the AI to run robotic systems. Now, until now, all robots, in my opinion, aren't robots. They're more like toasters. There's some software that's running some automation, and for me, automation is not robots. Robots mean autonomous in my mind. So we now don't even say robots. Most of the time, we say autonomous humanoids, just to get away from that. And the autonomous humanoids are general in nature, so that you can basically have the same form and do 1,000 different jobs and 1,000,000 different tasks. Over time, these will penetrate into the marketplace, and our hope is to help in the medical fields and then manufacturing in other areas. And then eventually, our mission is to be B2B, and then in about 7 years or less, go B2C. Because I think everybody would love to have their humanoid robot companion doing their dishes, washing their laundry, getting all their meals prepped, And in fact, your other AI will be ordering the food and dropping it outside the door, and then your robot will go in and pick it up. And so it'll do all the groceries and all the things that we don't want to do on a daily basis, it can do. Now, that doesn't mean you can't choose to cook your meal. You can. And if you love folding socks, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me. You mentioned Elon Musk earlier, and I was watching. I think I was watching a shareholder meeting, whatever, and he was talking about, oh yeah, we're gonna have this. This guy's gonna do your dishes. This guy will do your laundry. But and that's an incredible future to think about. Um, I'm interested, kind of, to go along with that, with people's reaction to AI and robotics. What the customer feedback has been like for you guys, and what are people saying, and how have you used that feedback to improve the product as well?
Right. So, of course, we don't have our first customers are lining up now that we're going to start servicing in the healthcare field. But people who want to be our customers, everything from a manpower source for workers in vineyards around the world, and of course, a humanoid robot could pick just the right ones and map all the other ones and know when to come back for them, and can, of course, work 24 hours a day in the dark as needed. And so much of the feedback has been, can you do these various tasks? And I would say 9 out of 10 times it's possible to do the task. It just needs to be trained up. And as a company, and not as an R&D company, but as a product company, we've selected one narrow area right now to train it into a hospital room. And the question is why? Everybody else is doing logistics. Why don't we do that? Well, that's the answer. Everybody else is doing logistics and they're building leg systems that fall down. We want to build that premium thing. So other people can build like their Vic kit computers. We want to build the high end Macintosh. So we want to build the high end robots, a high end brand, put that into the difficult arena, show that it's safe to be working around a patient, and then from there, we can quickly penetrate with that brand into hospitality, into retail, into elder care, into the home eventually.
So, how long did it take to train BEOMNI robots to be able to operate and work in these hospital and operating rooms?
So right now it's being trained to do simple things over the last 2.5 years, gaining the data and showing that it's possible. It's going to take about 2 years to, I guess we should give a range, 2 to 3 years for it to become a fully autonomous surgical tech. Um, and once we have that, then there's something called task transference. So the next expert minds will do 5 at once, and those will take a year, and then we'll go from there.
And training, does it kind of build up off the information it's learned in the past, so that when the next wave of
Yes.
roboids, autonomous human robots come out, they learn from the past, and they're also currently learning, currently growing, currently developing, and becoming more and more efficient?
Yeah, so kind of like the Borg, there's a hive mind. And so all the things it's learning in the surgical room and as a cleaning tech can then transfer over to different tasks. And it's more than just using instruments, because you're learning, developing the AI brain for haptics, and you're developing a whole other list of ways that it's interacting and observing. So task transference will mean that the first expert mind takes the longest, and the next ones can learn from that, and then you add to it. And then as you add each skill, those skills can be transferred. So if you took 5 different jobs and you wrote them down on paper, you could probably, well, this one I can do this. So like if I'm in the kitchen and I know how to distinguish different instruments, well, now it's just a different set of instruments, and I know how to pick them up. And now I'm not cutting because I'm not the surgeon. So now I teach it, okay, here's how you cut, here's how you use the blender. And then that's the fact that, oh, here's how you push a button can then be applied to anything that has a button. Here's how you open a container can be transferred to anything that opens a container.
So I want to get into your background a little bit more, which you talked about Apple a few times. You had a run in with Steve Jobs back in the day. You have incredibly diverse experiences. So I'm interested, what the lessons you have learned, and what are the lessons you have taken away from your experience, and maybe made you prepared for starting Beyond Imagination?
Sure. So, in fact, my mission in my life has been to develop the right side, the left side, and what I call the middle brain. And that's not a technical aspect for me. You should be an expert in some logical field, and then some creative field. So you're using the left and right sides of your brain, and also though in some sort of sport or physical activity, because you can think then like as a martial artist, and I have multiple black belts, including a third degree.
Hell yeah.
As a martial artist, you begin to think in motion, right? So not just in words or pictures, but just like a person in music thinks in notes, and probably a very good cook can think in tastes. Uh, my philosophy, my entire life has been develop all those, and for my students, I always emphasize that as well. Like find something in all three that you can be passionate about and excel. And for me, it was science and technology, martial arts, and then writing, producing, directing.
So science fiction, very important part of your life. We talked about it a little bit before the episode started. Why is science fiction so important?
For a lot of reasons, but for the fact that I was involved in science fiction before I was born, I don't think anybody else can kind of say that. My mom wrote, Mary Conway Kloor, a book called My Beloved Triosions, and she wrote this while she was carrying me. And so one would say science fiction is in my blood. So well, after I was born, I didn't get, Jack and Jill went up the hill or See Spot Run. I got Robert E. Heinlein, Asimov, Spider-Man, Hulk, Avengers. Um, and in fact, I'm very proud of the fact that I have a 20,000 plus comic book collection and many thousands of science fiction
Uh-huh.
books, along with all my, quantum chromodynamics and physics and chemistry books. And so for me, science fiction and science, they go hand in hand. One inspires the other, and the other inspires back.
Can you talk about your two simultaneous PhDs? I'm only asking this because that's astounding to me. I just got a master's degree in accounting, and I thought that was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So can you talk? Actually, Connor, it was in the same program. Can you talk about doing that and what that time of your life was like?
Sure. So I didn't know, because perhaps the disadvantage of reading too many comic books is that you're not allowed to even earn two PhDs, let alone simultaneously. Now, there are about 1,100 people who have managed to do it, but the rule is the mentality in most of these universities is, well, if you have a PhD in English, let's say in the 18th century, you could go and teach physics at Harvard, because you're a PhD and you can do anything. Now, the reality is in the modern world that's absurd. You probably can't even, if you have an organic chemistry PhD, go teach theoretical chemistry. It's probably never going to happen. But that was a mindset that I encountered when I went to Purdue University. And I chose that university because there were several research programs that I liked. And I was like, oh, I'm going to apply to both, only to be told, no, 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 you can't do that. So accelerating the discussion, I entered one program, passed all the exams on the first try, and so I got to skip the courses, qualified basically at the qualification level, and then just switched to physics and did the same thing. And then I just worked on two PhD programs while I was officially only one, and then became the hard work. I was required to write 5 times more than the average physics PhD and 4 times more than the normal chemistry one. And the school basically said, well, you can't have two. Why don't you just combine them? To which my professors were like, well, you understand that in chemistry, I solved the problem that Einstein and Schrodinger and a whole host of other people tried to solve and couldn't. And in physics, I was searching for new forces in nature. They have nothing to do with each other. Ultimately, hundreds of professors were gathered. Now, keep in mind, normally there's 4 that you defend your thesis on. In this case, I had hundreds of people gather, and my professor recently told this story in April because I just received a lifetime achievement award from the physics department at Purdue in April, and he stood up and gave this story about how a gigantic council, representatives from every department. So what does that mean? It means English had creativity, but they also had all their other disciplines that they sent someone in. At the end of the day, they all voted unanimously that I should be able to proceed. And then I actually defended simultaneously. So I did one defense. I didn't leave the room, and 4 new professors came in, and I continued the defense. Uh, and I did end up getting the 2 PhDs. And I, again, didn't realize it was anything special in my head until the Council of Graduate Schools and the Department of Education said, no one's ever done this in world history. And from there, yes, I became ABC World News Person of the Week and featured in hundreds of articles, including New York Times and in China Times and all the other places. But for me, I still had to pay the same price for a Coca-Cola or a comic book. So there you go.
That's really inspiring, and just seeing your drive. You know, you went to school and you did something that no one thinks about doing, but you're also doing that in real life right now with Beyond Imagination, where you are creating these robots that are going to be able to just improve the quality of life for everyone, and help out the world and make the world a better place. I do want to talk about the team you've assembled at Beyond Imagination, the star-studded cast. You and Ray co-founded it, but also on the board of advisors, you have Tony Robbins and Dean Kamen. So can you talk about
Yep.
assembling that team and just how much it's helped you and Beyond Imagination accomplish your mission?
Sure, and possibly it has to do with, again, reading too many comic books. So I consider them my Avengers assembly. So Dean Kamen, number one inventor in the world, interacted and participated with him for decades before having him come on as an advisor and help us with tech. Ray Kurzweil, lifetime friendship and partner. Tony Robbins, an investor and a partner and a business advisor, multiple time investor, in fact. Jim Giannopoulos ran Fox Studios for a very long time, and then went over and ran Paramount until December of 2021 as another business advisor and investor. Neil Jacobstein, Anushan Asari, all these folks, and they all bring in a certain talent pool and business savvy that's helped us rapidly accelerate. We also, in the 18 years before we launched the company, didn't sit on our hands. So we worked on all kinds of little projects, which would be stepping stones for what we were going to launch, whether it was an AI or sensors or robotics or anything else. And then my day-to-day team have folks like Michael David Ward, who's a world-class artist who helps in the outer design. I have Bob. I have Bob Harari, who is the CEO of Cellularity, who's also a founder. I have Vivek Katab, who runs the Brain Mapping and Therapeutic Society. So we get lots of neurologists and AI neurologists. I sit on the board for that organization, which helps us create the synthetic mind. And I have Bill Fisher, who's my COO, who is a super brain in terms of software programming and AI. John Best, who's another super brain in terms of networking and hacking hardware and doing other things. And it just goes on and on like that. So basically, a large pool of talented folks who are super passionate about what we're doing. We've spent a lot of time bootstrapping things. And one way or the other, as they say, by hook or crook, we were going to bring these autonomous robots to market. And one day, you'll have one as a companion.
I'm looking forward to that. There's a lot of good in this company, a lot of great people, a lot of great ideas, great products. What has been the biggest difficulty in creating all of that good? Have there been any bumps along the road that you guys had to overcome?
Yeah, and there still are. So, I mean, what I think the biggest bump is none of us have done. I've done exits, but I haven't done gigantic exits. And I have other people entering the market have been able to raise a lot more capital than us, who don't even really have a vision. They're just copying things that I've said and Boston Dynamic have said. But they have Wall Street experience, or they have access, and my hat's off to them because they've been able to raise, 60 million, 80 million. And then of course you have Elon Musk, who I just love,
As do I.
enters it. But for me, the way I look at it is they're not so much competitors as enablers, because I see, like, if there's a million Elon Musk robots on the market one day, and I can then license my brains, expert minds out to them, fabulous. But my biggest hurdle until recently has been to get to those funders. That's been changing in the last couple months as people now are coming to us. I have a big meeting after this from a brand name that I can't mention right now. We just signed a big manufacturing deal 3-4 weeks ago with DreamTech out of Korea, and they're pledging 10% of the round for both our main company and our sub company. So $6 million, 4 to Beyond and 2 to CSI. And I've got a bunch of other investment banks who are knocking on my door, etc. But until recently, the problem was, how do you get to the right people? And that's why, of course, crowdfunding exists. So when you can't get to them to start your company, you can do that. But for us, it's, you can't do $40 million in crowdfunding.
Right. I just looked. I know we're getting a little short on time, so I want to just leave you with one question. I have a million. I feel like I could ask you a million questions, but I'll leave you with this.
We can always do a part 2.
We could always do. I am more than open to doing that. My question is this: is how is Beyond Imagination going to change the world?
We're going to democratize access. We're going to reduce the cost of goods and services. We're going to enable millions of elderly and other people who can't get the care that they need to be able to have the care through these sort of systems. And so, in essence, we want to create a world of abundance and prosperity by how we deploy our systems.
That's fantastic. And from talking to you, I know that you have the team around you and the qualifications to do it. So I am extremely excited to see what you guys do with Beyond Imagination. I know that the WeFunder campaign is closing today, but you may open it up. We will put the link down there. And, if anyone wants to check it out or even just check out the page in general, that'll be in the description. But Dr. Kloor, thank you very much for your time. Again, I have a million questions as someone who's not a scientist by any means, but thank you for taking the time to tell us about your company.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and big shout out to all the people in your audience who love tech or science fiction. I encourage them to go to our website, BEOMNI, BEOMNI.ai. And I encourage them, actually, I've listened to all your other episodes, so I encourage them to listen to every episode, not just this episode.
Well, that makes me feel very good. Yeah, thank you very much. And we will put that link down there as well, your link to your website. So for all listeners out there, thank you very much for tuning in. And we will see you next time on the Next Big Thing podcast. So long.